Why did she still check the corners? 3 years in the same armory, walking the same concrete floor before dawn, and still. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun moved like a ghost in hostile territory. Her boots made no sound. Her eyes skimmed every shadow. To most, it was an unnecessary habit. To her, it was survival, muscle memory etched into her bones from another life she didn't talk about. The overhead fluorescents hummed in the silence, their light slicing the rows of weapon racks into narrow corridors of shadow. Assault rifles, machine guns, sniper rifles, steel lined the walls like a forest of quiet predators. To others, the place felt cold, dangerous. To Maya, it was the closest thing she had to peace. From her cargo pocket, she slid out the battered inventory tablet, its screen lighting her face with a sterile glow. Her fingers moved with mechanical precision, counting, logging, never hesitating. M41 carbines, 847 M249 SAWs, 1-50-6 Barrett M82s, 23. Her eyes lingered on that last number longer than they should have. Then she forced herself to move on. Some ghosts didn't need to be awakened. She reached the far end of the armory, where the newest shipment sat on its pallets minus 556mm rounds. Neatly boxed, waiting for distribution, she bent to lift the first case, and the moment she did, something felt wrong. Not broken, not obvious, just wrong. The weight was off, subtly enough that anyone else would have missed it. But these were hands that had loaded thousands of rounds under fire, where one faulty cartridge could decide if you went home or didn't go home at all. She set the box down, flipped it open. Rows of polished brass stared back at her, perfect to any casual glance. She plucked around, rolling it between her fingers, feeling for the truth her eyes couldn't see. Microscopic imperfections along the casing, powder inconsistencies so slight they'd escape standard testing. She wasn't an armory clerk when she learned to find these things. She learned them where mistakes bled into the sand. "Morning, Sergeant Chun." She didn't look up. Petty Officer Rodriguez leaned against the rack, coffee steaming in his hand, his hair still messy from the pillow. "Early again." "Huh. Same time every day," she murmured, still turning the cartridge in her hand. "Yes, so, I swear. You're like a ninja. Never hear you coming, never see you leave. Martinez says you might be a ghost." She gave him a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just trying to stay out of everyone's way. Well, your ghost act saved us last month. Those bad primers you caught could have been ugly if they made it to the teams." Rodriguez sipped, winced. "Speaking of, SEAL Team 7's pulling ammo today. Big exercise at 11. Her head barely moved, but she noted it. SEAL Team 7. She'd seen them before. Men who moved with the same predatory ease she used to have. Their chief, Jake Morrison, had a reputation for seeing details others missed. That made him dangerous. Rodriguez wandered off, and Maya's hands moved faster. Instinct gnawed at her. Something was wrong with this shipment. By the time she'd examined enough rounds to be certain, her breathing had changed. Shallower. Sharper. She was back in Helmand Province in her mind, kneeling beside her spotter, both of them working through their kit before a mission. She forced the memory back into the box. Not now. She flagged the shipment for immediate quarantine. 50,000 rounds, all defective. It would cost thousands. Delay training, but she knew the alternative. She'd seen rifles fail when it mattered. She'd seen men die for less. As she finished the report, her eyes caught her reflection in the polished locker door. The woman staring back wore regulation. Sneakers instead of combat boots. Her hair was longer, framing a softer face. She'd built herself into something harmless, but her hands, steady, sure, told the truth. The door clanged open. More personnel. She melted into the shadows. Between racks, invisible again. But somewhere deep inside, something stirred. That old, dangerous part of her she'd buried. She told herself it was nothing. The sun hit the Coronado training grounds like a hammer. SEAL Team 7 moved with purpose, loading gear into the staging area. Chief Morrison scanned them like a man checking a blade he'd honed for years. This was no ordinary training day. The evaluation ahead would decide their future. A high-priority mission or mindless patrol duty. Morrison's men had trained for months, every movement rehearsed until it was reflex. He gave the signal, weapons check. Danny Reaper Kowalski, their marksman, ran his hands along his M4 like a man blessing an old friend, Marcus Tank. Williams, the heavy weapons specialist, lifted his M249 like it was weightless. Each man trusted his weapon more than anything else. The scenario was brutal. Breach a 3-story building, neutralize 12 hostiles, extract 3 hostages, 18 minutes, 0 civilian casualties, no room for error. Remember, Morrison told him, the board's watching everything. They hit the start line like a machine. First floor, flawless. Suppressed fire took down targets cleanly. Then it happened. Kowalski's M4 jammed mid-engagement. A clean failure drill didn't fix it. Chief, primary's down, he called, swapping to his sidearm. Morrison's own rifle locked up, trigger dead, before he could process it. Tank's M249 double-fed. Catastrophic failure. It spread across the team like a disease. Rifles failing. Feeding problems, malfunctions that didn't make sense. The carefully rehearsed assault dissolved into chaos. Cease fire. The range officer's voice echoed. The team stood, weapons hanging limp. Morrison had never seen anything like it. Simultaneous failures across an entire unit. This wasn't bad luck. Something was wrong. And then he saw her, Maya Chun, walking toward him from the armory, a small toolkit in hand. He almost didn't register it. The speed she moved for someone in a desk job. She went straight to Kowalski. "May I?" she asked. The marksman hesitated. SEALs didn't hand their weapons to supply clerks, but Morrison gave a nod. What happened next, Morrison couldn't quite describe. Her hands moved over the rifle like they'd been there 1,000 times before. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She stripped the bolt, examined the chamber, and murmured to herself, brass shavings in the extension. Improper case head spacing. She cleaned the debris, reassembled, chambered around. "Try now," Kowalski fired. Perfect, smooth cycling. His eyebrows went up. She was already moving to Morrison's weapon. Every diagnosis precise. Every fix efficient. She identified faults most armorers would need hours to find. Morrison found himself watching her face. Gone was the anonymity he'd seen around base. Now there was focus. Control. The same kind he'd seen in his own snipers before a critical shot. When she was done, she said, "Defective ammo batch." Some rounds made it through before the quarantine. Morrison tested his rifle. Perfect. He studied her. "Where exactly did you learn to do that?" For just a moment, something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone. "YouTube," she said with a shrug. But Morrison had been around too many professionals to believe that. As she walked away, he made a decision. He was going to find out exactly who Staff Sergeant Maya Chun really was. Chief Morrison couldn't sleep. It wasn't just the rifle malfunctions. It was her hands. The way Maya Chun had moved over those weapons, fast, precise, decisive, haunted him more than the failures themselves. She hadn't needed to ask. What was wrong? She'd known. She'd fixed them like she'd done it under fire before. That wasn't armory work. That was combat work by 0230. Morrison had stopped pretending he'd get any rest. He pulled on PT gear and hit the base gym. The place was empty. He liked it that way. A man could think when all he heard was his own breath and the treadmill's hum. He ran, replaying every second of that afternoon in his mind. How she approached the rifles. How she never once looked vulnerable, even surrounded by operators. How she positioned herself so no one could get behind her, and her breathing controlled. Measured, like someone who'd trained to steady a crosshair on a heartbeat. When the thought finally landed, it hit like a hammer sniper. Not just someone who'd fired a rifle, someone who'd lived behind one, someone who'd survived by seeing things others missed. By 0500, Morrison knew what he was going to do. The base security office was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors. Chief Petty Officer Sarah Martinez looked up from her desk as he stepped inside. "You're up early, even for you." "I need a favor," Morrison said, settling into the chair across from her. "Security footage, Armory Corridor, yesterday." 0500 to 0600. Martinez's eyebrows rose. "What am I looking for?" "Maya Chun," her expression sharpened. "The ammo tech? I want to see how she moves when she thinks no one's watching." Martinez didn't ask more. She'd served with Morrison long enough to know he didn't waste time chasing ghosts without reason. The footage loaded. Grainy black and white empty hallway. Until Maya appeared, Martinez let out a low whistle. Look at her. She didn't walk the corridor. She cleared it, slicing the pie at every corner, checking angles like a CQB instructor. Even entering the armory, she swept the room and controlled. Arcs before moving in, not a wasted motion, not a hint of doubt. "That," Martinez murmured, "is normal for a supply clerk." "No," Morrison agreed. "It's not. Want me to pull her file?" "Do it." Her personnel record popped onto the screen. It was neat. Too neat. Enlisted in the Marines in 2018. Transferred to Navy in 2022. But in between, a whole 3 years missing. No cross-training records, Martinez said. No advanced weapons courses either. She's listed as basic rifle qualified. That's it. That's not possible. Martinez leaned back. Could be classified deployments. Special operations units don't always leave trails. Run a facial recognition. Search, Morrison said quietly. Marine Corps' Special Operations databases. Martinez hesitated. You're pushing boundaries, Jake. If she's hiding for a good reason, we drop it. But if she has skills my team needs, I have to know. She sighed, typing. The search. Churned, seconds stretched. Then, a chime. The image that appeared wasn't the Maya Chun the base knew. Camouflage paint streaked her face. Combat gear hugged her frame. Her eyes were different, hard, focused, predatory. The kind of stare that came from looking through a scope at people who never saw you. Martinez read aloud. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun, Marine Corps Scout Sniper. 3 deployments to Afghanistan, 47. Confirmed kills. Call sign. Angel 6. Morrison stared at the file. The reports read like war stories. Impossible shots. Night operations with 0 civilian casualties. Extractions under fire. She'd been paired with Corporal David Rabbit. Martinez, no relation to Sarah for all 3 tours. One of the most effective sniper teams in theater. Then the last entry, March 15th, 2022. Rabbit killed by IED. Maya present. Recommended immediate stateside reassignment for combat stress. Morrison sat back slowly. She wasn't hiding from enemies. She was hiding from herself. He found her that night. The armory was quiet. Lit only by emergency strips. Shadows stretched between the racks. He moved carefully. Startling a sniper in the dark was a bad idea. I know you're here, he said softly. Angel 6. Silence. Then her voice from the shadows. That's not my name anymore. She stepped into view, empty hands visible. But her position gave her 3 clean exit routes and full sight of him. Old habits. 3 deployments. 47 confirmed kills, Morrison said evenly. Quite a record. For someone who claims she learned weapons maintenance on YouTube. Her eyes flickered, but her tone stayed flat. You've been busy. So have you, pretending to be a supply clerk. Maybe I got tired of killing people? Or maybe you lost someone, and the only way to survive was to bury who? You were... Something cracked in her eyes. Just for a second, then she said it. Rabbit was my spotter, my partner, my best friend. We did everything together. He was supposed to be safe that day. Just a supply run. Her voice flattened, reciting the rest like a report. IED in a pothole we'd driven over a dozen times. Flipped a Humvee. I walked away. He didn't. She turned away. I was supposed to protect him. You think burying Angel 6 will make that pain go away? Morrison asked quietly. It was supposed to, she said. No impossible shots. No lives in my hands. Just counting bullets. You can't turn it off, Morrison said. The way you move, the way you see things, it's still there. Her tone sharpened. What do you want from me, Chief? My team has an evaluation in 72 hours. We need a weapons specialist. Someone who can think like an enemy sniper. Find someone else. There is no one else. He took a breath. The cell we're after. They're the same people. Who killed Rabbit? Her head snapped toward him. You're lying. He showed her the classified file. Names, locations, the bomb maker's profile. Maya's hands gripped a rack so tightly her knuckles whitened. Even if it's true, I'm not that person anymore. You flagged that bad ammo because you still think like a warrior. You fix my team's rifles because you can't stand to see good soldiers fail. Angel 6 isn't dead. She's just sleeping. Her voice broke. You don't know what it's like to carry that much death. Every face, every failure, and his face. The worst, he stepped closer. Rabbit didn't die because you failed. He died because war is chaos. But if you help us stop these people, his death means something. She wiped her eyes roughly. And if I get your men killed because I'm not sharp anymore, then we deal with it. But I've seen you work. Your instincts are still there. She stared at the floor for a long time. I need time to think. You've got until tomorrow night. After that, we move. As he left, she stood alone in the shadows. The armory suddenly feeling less like a refuge and more like a cage. Why did the ocean smell like Afghanistan tonight? Maya walked the perimeter of the base in silence, the Pacific breeze cool against her face. But her senses kept betraying her. Every shadow felt like a sniper hide. Every distant clang of metal sounded like a mortar tube dropping around. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Morrison's words kept looping in her head. The same people who killed Rabbit. She hated that they were working. By dawn, she'd convinced herself she had her answer. Not the one Morrison wanted. The one she could live with. She found him in the SEAL team briefing room at 0600. Maps covered the walls. Satellite imagery glowed on laptops. His men moved around with quiet focus, preparing for the day. Chief Morrison. She said from the doorway, I need to speak with you, alone. He dismissed the room with a nod. You've made your decision. I can't do it, she said flatly. I can't be who you want me to be. Find someone else. He didn't argue, not yet. He walked to a secure laptop, opened the classified file, and turned the screen toward her. Surveillance footage, Kabul. Timestamp 2 weeks ago. A busy marketplace, vendors shouting, children running between stalls. Then, the frame lit up with fire and debris. People thrown to the ground. A rolling cloud of dust swallowing everything. Maya's hands clenched involuntarily. Hawken Network, Morrison said. Same bomb maker, same tactics, 43 dead, including 12 children. This was just a test run. He clicked to another file, intercepted communications. Voices in a language she knew well enough to understand, even without translation. They're planning something bigger, Morrison said quietly. Hundreds could die. My team is the only one in position to stop it. Then send someone else. She snapped, turning away. There is no one else, he said, voice low but unyielding. We need someone who understands them. Who knows how they think? She spun back to him, eyes blazing. You want me to be a killer again. You want me to pick up a rifle and put crosshairs on people until they stop breathing. I want you to save lives, Morrison countered, his own voice rising. You've done it before. Every time you pulled that trigger in Afghanistan, you saved soldiers and civilians who never even knew your name. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Don't you dare use Rabbit against me." Morrison reached into his pocket and took out a worn photograph. Rabbit and Maya, shoulder to shoulder, grinning in full combat gear. "Look at his face." Morrison said, "Do you really think he'd want you to spend the rest of your life hiding in an armory?" She stared at it. She remembered the heat, the dust, the way he'd kept spirits up with stupid jokes during 12-hour Overwatch shifts. He'd always said the same thing. It's not about killing. It's about protecting the ones who can't protect themselves. Her voice came out small. "I'm not the same person I was then. I'm not sharp anymore. What if I freeze? Then we adapt, we overcome, and we make sure you're not alone this time." Morrison said, "You'll have backup, always." She looked out the window on the training ground. His team moved like a single organism, each man's life in the other's hands. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" She said finally, "Technical support," Morrison said quickly. "Weapons, equipment, tactical consultation. You won't engage unless absolutely necessary." She snorted. "But you still want me armed?" "Yes," Morrison said simply. "Because in our line of work, everyone has to be ready to pull the trigger." She closed her eyes. The weight of it pressed against her chest. Rabbit's laugh echoed faintly in her head, followed by the sharp memory of his still body in the dirt. Finally, she said, "I have conditions." Morrison straightened. "Name them." "One mission. That's it. After this, I go back to my quiet life." "Agreed." "I keep my current rank and position. No transfers. No permanent reassignment to your unit." "Done. If I break, if the stress hits me, you pull me out. No questions, no mission first. You get me to safety." Morrison hesitated only a moment. "You have my word." She turned to face him. The look in her eyes wasn't Angel 6. It was someone else. Someone who'd chosen to fight again. But on her own terms. "When do we leave?" 48 hours, he said. "Forward staging area first. Then insertion under darkness." He held out his hand. She stared at it, knowing that shaking it would shatter the fragile quiet she'd spent 3 years building. Somewhere in her memory, Rabbit's voice said the thing it always said. "Do what's right." No matter the cost, she took Morrison's hand. "My name is Maya Chun," she said. "Angel 6 died in Afghanistan, but Maya Chun will help you bring some killers to justice." 48 hours later, the Nevada desert was still a stone under a moonless sky. Maya lay prone on a rooftop 800 meters from the target building, the M110 sniper rifle feeling both alien and familiar in her grip. 3 days of intense prep had brought old muscle memory roaring back. The slow, steady breathing, the unconscious calculations of wind and range. "Angel 6, this is actual." Morrison's voice crackled in her ear. "Final weapons check? How copy?" She adjusted her scope. "Copy. Actual. Overwatch in position. Eyes on primary and secondary objectives. Below." Morrison's team flowed toward the building like shadows, each man carrying a weapon she'd stripped, cleaned, and rebuilt herself. "Remember," Morrison whispered, "you're our guardian angel tonight." Her breathing slowed to the 4-count rhythm she used to live by. She kept her crosshairs steady as the team stacked at the breach point. The charge went off and everything went wrong. Instead of a controlled entry, the entire front wall collapsed, a blast wave sending dust and debris into the night. Her gut dropped. This wasn't training. Buildings compromised. Morrison's voice came sharp. "We've got multiple secondaries." Through her scope, Maya saw them. Enemy fighters slipping out of concealed positions. Their weapons real, their movements desperate. Actual. 6 tangos approaching from the north, she reported, voice turning clinical. "Range 400 meters. We can't move," Morrison said. "Kowalski's trapped under debris." Her scope locked onto the lead fighter, a bearded man with an AK, and for a moment, she wasn't in Nevada anymore. She was back in Afghanistan, in the heat and dust, a heartbeat away from ending another life, Her finger froze. 3 years of avoiding this moment. 3 years of seeing rabbit every time she closed her eyes. Angel 6, I need that shot. Morrison's voice cut through the static. Her chest tightened. The fighters were closing. Fire poured into Morrison's position. Kowalski was bleeding out. And then, she heard it, Rabbit's voice, Maya. You're not a killer. You're a protector. Every shot saves lives. Her breathing steadied. Crosshairs centered. Muscle memory took over. The rifle cracked, 800 meters away. The lead fighter dropped. The bolt cycled smooth. Another target. Another shot. Another body fell. Holy, Kowalski's voice cut in over the radio. Angel 6 is back, Morrison said, almost to himself. And she's pissed. The desert air was thin, sharp in her lungs as she exhaled into the stock. Through her scope, the night was no longer black. It was shapes and angles, movement and threat. She shifted to the second-story window. A flash of metal glinted. The telltale curve of a sniper barrel. One breath in, one steady hold. The shot was clean. The figure collapsed into the dark behind the glass. On the ground, the Haqqani fighters faltered. Their forward momentum bled away into confusion as two of their leaders dropped in seconds. They began shouting, splitting their attention between Morrison's pinned team and the invisible death striking from afar. Maya didn't rush. She'd learned long ago that rushing made you sloppy. Every movement was deliberate. Target. Calculate, breathe, fire, bolt, repeat. To her right, an enemy with a chest rig stuffed full of magazines darted toward the collapsed wall. Her mind ran the numbers before she even thought about it. Minus 32 mils high to adjust for the uphill grade. Half a mil left for the crosswind skimming the rooftop. She squeezed. He dropped mid-stride, skidding into the dust. Morrison's voice came low over Combs. We've got an opening. Cover us. She didn't need the answer. Her shots did the talking. One at a man trying to flank through the alley. Another at a rifleman leading around a burned-out car. Each shot bought the SEALs another second to move another meter towards safety. Somewhere in the chaos, Kowalski's ragged voice broke in. Clear off me. Clear offa. I'm good. I'm up. Maya tracked him as two team members hauled him free from the rubble. His leg was a mess, but he was alive. 7 minutes. That's how long it lasted. 7 minutes from the first breach to the moment the last hostile went down and the radio fell silent except for Morrison's controlled breathing. Objective secure, he said. 2 hostages recovered, 1 friendly WI intel package in hand. She lowered the rifle slowly. Her hands were steady, but her heart was thundering. She knew that rhythm, the rush after a firefight, the quiet that wasn't really quiet. She stayed prone for a moment longer, watching the SEALs disappear into the darkness, moving their wounded. Only when the extraction bird's rotors faded into the distance did she let herself roll onto her back, staring up at the cold desert stars. By the time they were back at the staging area, the evaluation board's verdict was already in, but everyone knew what it would say. Morrison's team had turned the most dangerous training ground on the continent into a shooting gallery. The board had reviewed the rooftop footage in stunned silence. The after-action report would read like a textbook case in Overwatch precision. Maya ignored the praise. She cleaned the M110 on autopilot, her hands working the familiar rhythm while her mind wandered somewhere else entirely. She could still see the men she'd shot tonight, hear the snap of each round leaving the chamber, except it didn't feel the way it used to. Back in Helmand, every shot had left a mark on her. Every face had carved itself into her memory. But tonight, there was only one thing she saw. Morrison's team alive, Kowalski breathing, the hostages walking out on their own feet. She tried to decide whether that made it easier or harder. Morrison found her alone in the gear bay, the rifle broken down on the bench in front of her. You saved us, he said simply. She didn't look up. I did my job. Don't downplay it. If you hadn't been up there, Kowalski wouldn't have made it back. Neither would those civilians. Maya kept wiping down the barrel. You think that makes it clean? You think that erases the fact that I put 12 people in the ground tonight? They weren't civilians, Morrison said. They were killers who've already proven they'd murder innocents without blinking, and you stopped them. She finally met his eyes. You can dress it however you want, Chief. Pulling the trigger is still pulling the trigger. He studied her for a long moment. Yeah, but you pulled it for the right reasons. The next day, the official evaluation ended in predictable fashion. The board signed off with the highest operational readiness score they'd seen in 2 years. SEAL Team 7 was cleared for deployment. Word spread fast on base. Everyone wanted to know about the mysterious armory tech who'd been on the roof. Morrison didn't tell them anything. That afternoon, Maya walked the armory floor in silence. Everything looked the same. The steel racks, the humming lights, the endless rows of brass and polymer. But the air felt different. She'd thought coming back for one night wouldn't change her. That she could step into the role, execute, and step back out untouched. But the problem with touching that part of herself again was that it didn't go quietly. She didn't feel the predatory thrill she'd lived on in Afghanistan. But she also didn't feel as dead inside as she had the past 3 years. Maybe that was dangerous. Late that night, she sat outside her quarters with a mug of coffee gone cold. She could hear the Pacific from here. The low, endless shush of waves. She thought about Rabbit. About how he'd hated the term confirmed kill because it turned something heavy into something cold and bureaucratic. We're not tallying points. He used to say, we're making sure good people see another sunrise. She wondered if he'd have been proud of her last night. She wondered if he would have told her she'd done the right thing. Somewhere deep down, she thought maybe he had. 2 days later, the deployment orders came through. Morrison's team would move to the forward operating base within the week. Maya's role was listed in the op plan as weapons and technical specialist. She wasn't on the roster for ground assault, but both of them knew that plans changed in the field. Maya walked into the armory one last time before they left. The racks loomed over her like sentinels. She took her time inspecting each piece of gear slated for the mission, running her hands along the steel, checking the tolerances. Her hands didn't shake. When Morrison came to check on the loadout, she was sealing the last crate. All set? He asked. Everything's clean. Every round inspected. No repeats of last time. Good. He hesitated, then added, we leave at 0400. Get some rest. She didn't answer. She was looking at the M110 lying in its case, the gloss of the scope catching the light. She closed the lid slowly, almost reluctantly, then locked it down. That night, she dreamt of the desert. Not the kind you could drive across in a few hours, but the kind that stretched on forever. She was lying in the dirt beside Rabbit, the two of them hidden under a camouflage net. In the dream, he wasn't dead. He was grinning at her, chewing on a piece of jerky like it was the best thing in the world. You've still got it, he said. Don't waste it. When she woke, it was 0330. She dressed without thinking, the motion smooth and quiet. At 0400, she was at the airstrip, standing beside Morrison as the engines wound up. Neither of them spoke as they walked toward the aircraft, but when they stepped inside, Morrison glanced at her. Welcome back to the fight, he said. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. The flight out was long, and the staging area remote, a wind-scoured forward base tucked between jagged ridges. They were close enough now that any mistake could get them killed. Briefings ran back to back. Satellite imagery, intel from local sources. The Haqqani network's safe houses, escape routes, and weapons caches. Maya listened, silent, committing it all to memory. She'd told herself she wouldn't think like Angel 6 again. But her mind was already making the connections, mapping firing lanes, identifying choke points. When Morrison noticed, he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. They moved to the range for final zeroing. Maya set up the M110, feeling the familiar balance as she adjusted the bipod. She'd told Morrison she wasn't there to engage unless absolutely necessary, but she wasn't about to step into a mission with an untested rifle. First shot, 800 meters. Dead center, second wind. Correction, half-mil hold. Dead center, third. Moving target. 450 meters. Clean hit. Kowalski whistled low from behind her. Hell, Chief, she's better than me. Maya didn't turn. Don't compare, she said quietly. Just be ready. That night, as she lay in the dim barracks, she found herself staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She just knew that for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't hiding, and that was both the most terrifying and the most freeing thing she'd felt in a long time. The night they moved, the air was heavy with the kind of stillness soldiers notice first. No wind, no distant dogs barking, no mechanical hum from far-off villages. Just a silence that pressed in on your ears, making you feel like something was. Listening back, the aircraft's red interior lights painted every face in blood tones. Morrison's men sat strapped in along the walls, weapons cradled against their chests. Maya sat apart, near the rear ramp, her M110 in its case beside her. She wasn't here to fight. At least, not officially. She kept her gaze forward, but her mind was already doing the work. Every briefing, every satellite image was layered in her head like a map she could walk blindfolded. She knew the distances between the entry points, knew where the Haqqani fighters would place sentries, knew the sniper hide she'd choose if she were on the other side. Old habits. 10 minutes, the crew chief called, his voice barely audible over the thrum of rotors. Morrison moved down the line, checking his men. When he reached her, he paused, gripping the seat frame beside her. You ready? Her eyes stayed on the floor. I told you, I'm here for technical support. And I told you, plans change in the field. She finally looked at him. That was your way of saying you expect me to fight. It's my way of saying, I expect you to keep people alive, he said. Whatever that takes. The insertion zone was a dry riverbed, shielded from the village lights by a low ridge. They moved quickly, silently, packs cinched tight to keep gear from rattling. Morrison's team flowed into a staggered column, each man covering a sector. Maya stayed near the middle, rifle case over her shoulder, sidearm holstered high. The weight felt strange. She'd carried heavier in Afghanistan, but back then it had been second nature. Now, every ounce was a reminder of what she'd sworn she'd never do again. They reached the staging point, a cluster of ruined walls overlooking the village. From here, you could smell the cook fires, hear faint voices drifting up from the dirt. Streets, Morrison crouched beside her. You're overwatch until we're in. If things go bad, you've got discretion. Discretion, she repeated, like the word tasted foreign. It means I trust you to know when to shoot. She set up the M110 on a broken parapet. Night vision bathed the world in green shadows. She swept the scope across the village. Marking movement, 2 armed men at the north entrance, another sitting by a doorway, smoking. In her ear, Morrison's voice was low. Team 1, breach in 30. She watched them melt into the alleys, disappearing into the maze. For 5 minutes, nothing moved except the thin veil of dust carried by the night air. Then the first shots cracked from somewhere inside the village, suppressed, controlled, followed by a short burst of automatic fire. Morrison's voice came tight over comms. Contact. 1 hostile down, multiple unknowns moving toward our position. She found them in her scope. 3, maybe 4 fighters running low between the buildings. Rifles ready. Her finger hovered over the trigger. You're not here to fight. One of them rounded a corner, and the glint of a weapon's barrel lined perfectly toward Morrison's men. The shot broke almost without her deciding. The man folded into the dust. She shifted, found the second target. Another squeeze, another fall. The rest scattered into the alleys. Inside the objective building, Morrison's team found the hostages. 2 men and a woman, bound but alive. They were moving them toward Exfil when the trap sprung. A pickup truck roared into the main street. Bed-mounted machine gun already spitting fire. The rounds chewed into the walls around the seals, pinning. "Them, Maya, talk to me." Morrison's voice snapped. She swung her scope to the street. The gunner was braced high in the truck's bed, his face half hidden by a scarf. The angle was bad. Only part of his torso exposed. She adjusted her hold. Breath slowing, the chaos. Fading to a narrow tunnel, 4 count in, hold 4 count out. The round punched through his chest. He dropped instantly. The truck jerked as the driver tried to reverse, and that was when she saw it, under the truck's frame, wired to the rear. "Axel, a shaped charge." Her voice was sharp. "Actual, you've got explosives on the vehicle. Get clear now." Morrison's team ducked into cover as the blast tore the truck apart, lighting the street with a bloom of fire. The concussion rolled across the rooftops, rattling her teeth. After that, the exfil was a blur. They moved fast, pushing the hostages toward the extraction point, Maya covering their retreat from the high ground. Twice more she fired. Clean, deliberate shots that dropped advancing fighters before they could close the distance. By the time the bird lifted off with everyone aboard, her pulse was finally starting to slow. She didn't speak for the first half of the flight back. She sat with the rifle across her knees, eyes fixed on some point far beyond the bulkhead. Morrison sat across from her, watching. Finally, she said, "Don't get used to it." His brow furrowed. "What?" "This," she said, nodding toward the rifle. "Me doing this, it's not who I am anymore." "You're right," Morrison said. "It's not who you are, it's what you can do. And there's difference." They landed at the ford. Base under the first pale light of dawn. The prisoners were turned over to intelligence, the hostages to medics. Maya stripped the M110 down again, hands moving on muscle memory. Every part checked twice before being packed away. Her body felt heavy, but not from fatigue. It was the weight of knowing she'd crossed the line she'd sworn she wouldn't. And yet, she couldn't ignore that without those shots. Morrison's men and the hostages wouldn't be breathing right now. That was the part she hated, that saving lives had cost her a little more of herself. That night, she walked the outer wall of the base alone. The desert was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This one was earned, the kind you get after violence when you know you made it through, but you're not sure at what cost. She stopped at the far corner, leaning on the low wall, eyes scanning the horizon. Can't sleep either? She turned. Kowalski limped toward her, his leg wrapped tight, crutches tucked under one arm. "I don't sleep much," she admitted. He stopped beside her. "Chief says you saved my life twice, first with the ammo back on base. And last night when you pulled me out of that mess, I didn't do it for you," she said. "Doesn't matter why," he replied. "It matters that you did." For a long moment, they stood in silence, listening to the desert breathe. When he left, she stayed a little longer, watching the horizon lightened by a shade. Tomorrow, the hunt for the Haqqani network would push deeper, and she knew, whether she admitted it out loud or not, that she'd be on that rooftop again when it happened. The briefing room was cold, not from the air, but from what was on the wall. Projected on the whiteboard were 3 still images, each one grainy, pulled from intercepted drone footage, a warehouse, a convoy of covered trucks, a long, rectangular object being moved by 6 men in gloves. Morrison stood beside the images, his voice even. "This is what we pulled from the safe house intel. The Haqqani network's next move isn't just a bombing. It's coordinated multiple detonations. Synchronized targets?" Kowalski asked from the back, his legs still wrapped but his attention locked on the board. "Not confirmed," Morrison said, "but estimates say casualty numbers in the hundreds. Possibly more if one of the targets is a transit hub." Maya stood in the corner, arms folded, listening but not speaking. She wasn't part of the official assault roster. She was support. A word she'd learned didn't mean much once bullets started flying. She already knew the real reason she was here. Morrison wanted her mind as much as her trigger. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Hit the convoy before it reached its dispersal point. The trucks were the key. Destroy them or capture the drivers, and the chain broke. The convoy route ran through a canyon, narrow, steep, with only one exit. It was perfect for an ambush. And just as perfect for an ambush against the ambushers. That was what kept needling her. The Haqqani leaders weren't stupid. If the convoy was moving in daylight, it meant they felt untouchable, which meant they prepared for someone like Morrison. The team moved at dusk, scaling the ridge above the canyon under the cover of shadows. The rock under their boots was loose, every step threatening to send pebbles tumbling into the dark below. Maya carried the M110 again, slung tight across her chest. She told herself she was here to watch angles, to call out positions, to keep the team's weapons running if anything went wrong. But deep down, she knew better. They reached the overlook with 2 hours to spare before the convoy's expected arrival. The desert stretched out forever in both directions, the horizon a blur of heat even in the fading light. Morrison sent his men along the ridge, each covering a segment of the kill zone. Maya found her position behind a jagged outcrop, the barrel of her rifle just brushing the edge of the rock. Time slowed in the way it always did before contact. She let her breathing find the old rhythm. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. Her eyes tracked every shadow, every movement in the distance. Then she saw it, a glint far down the canyon, barely visible through the heat haze. She shifted the scope, focused. Trucks. They rolled in slowly, engines muted by the canyon walls. 3 in front, 1 larger in the middle, 2 more in the rear. The one in the middle was covered tighter than the rest. The tarp lashed down with extra cord. Convoy in sight. She murmured into Cums. Morrison's voice came back low. Hold until my mark. That was when she noticed something else. Shadows in the cliffs across the canyon. Her gut tightened. She slid the scope further left and found them. Fighters. Dug into concealed positions. Weapons trained not on the canyon floor, but up at them. Morrison, she cut in, voice sharp. We're compromised. They've got counter-sniper positions at 11 and 1 o'clock. Copy, he said, but she could hear the shift in his tone. The quick mental math of a leader realizing his clean ambush just turned into a two-way trap. Do we pull? Tank's voice asked over comms. Negative, Morrison replied. We adapt. The first shot came from across the canyon, a sharp crack that pinned off the rocks 2 feet from her head. She didn't flinch. She'd been under worse. She found the shooter in her scope, a man braced behind a crude rock wall. Steady on the trigger, the angle was tight, but the distance was familiar. She made the adjustment and fired. He dropped behind the wall, whether hit or diving for cover, she couldn't tell. Either way, it bought them seconds. Below, the lead truck was accelerating, the convoy trying to push through the kill zone before Morrison's men could cut them off. Hit the front vehicle. Morrison barked. A rocket whooshed from Tank's position, slamming into the dirt in front of the first truck. The explosion lifted it halfway off the ground, blocking the canyon. The rest of the convoy skidded to a halt. That's when the canyon erupted. Gunfire ricocheted off the walls, echoing so loud it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. Morrison's men returned fire. Each burst met with a reply from the cliffs. Maya worked the bolt in steady rhythm, picking off targets that exposed themselves for more than a heartbeat. She wasn't thinking about what she'd promised herself. She wasn't thinking about Angel 6. She was thinking about keeping the men below alive. Her scope found the driver of the middle truck, the one with the heavy tarp. He was scrambling out the door, clutching a remote trigger in his fist. Her voice cut sharp into comms. Middle truck is wired. Driver's hot, I have the shot. Take it, Morrison ordered. One breath, one squeeze. The man fell backward into the dust, the remote skittering from his hand. Angel 6, we've got movement in the back truck. Kowalski called. She pivoted. The rear tarp was shifting. And a moment later, the truth emerged. Not crates, but people, 6 men, all armed. All firing toward the ridge. The decision was instant. She took the first man clean through the shoulder, spinning him into the truck bed. The second went down with a shot to the thigh. The others ducked back under cover, returning fire blind. Morrison's men used the gap to advance down toward the canyon floor, sweeping the vehicles. The fight lasted 9 minutes. 9 minutes that felt like an hour. When it was over, the convoy was in their control. The Haqqani fighters dead or captured, and the explosives disarmed. But Maya wasn't looking at the trucks. She was staring through her scope at the last man she'd shot, the one in the thigh. He was alive, clutching the wound, glaring up at the ridge with a mix of hatred and something else she couldn't name. He was young, too young. For a moment, the sound of the canyon faded, and she saw him not as an enemy, but as someone's son. Someone who'd been handed a rifle and told where to point it. Her finger hovered on the trigger again, and then she pulled back. That night, back at the forward base, Morrison found her alone, sitting on a crate with the M110 beside her. "You did good work today," he said. She didn't look up. "I let one live. On purpose?" "Yes," he nodded once. "Then you made the call you thought was right." She looked at him sharply. "You're not going to tell me it was a mistake?" "I've led enough missions to know the difference between killing because you have to and killing because you can," Morrison said. "And the day you stop knowing that difference is the day you shouldn't be out here." She thought about that long after he left. For years, she believed that the only way to protect was to be ruthless, to end every threat completely. But tonight she'd hesitated, and instead of feeling like a failure, she felt something else, maybe mercy, had its place in war. Or maybe it was just a crack in the armor she couldn't afford to have. She didn't know which one scared her more. The interrogation room was lit by a single bulb. It swung slightly, casting the captured Haqqani fighter's shadow across the wall in jagged shapes. Morrison stood in the corner, silent. The base's intel officer did the talking, leaning across the table, voice low but sharp. The man on the other side, the one Maya had shot in the thigh, barely moved. His dark eyes flicked from the officer to her, then back again. He'd been patched up, bandaged, given water. She wasn't sure why she'd come in here. Maybe to see if mercy had actually changed anything when the officer pressed him about the convoy's final destination. The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "They'll still come," he said in broken English. "You stopped one road. There are others." Her jaw tightened. "Where?" His gaze slid back to her. "You were the ghost on the ridge," he said, his accent wrapping around the word ghost like it meant more than it should. "The one they warned us about." She didn't answer, but in her chest, her heart kicked. Once hard. Hours later, the intel came through, not from him, but from the contents of a C-sat phone, coordinates, a time, a location too close to a civilian district for comfort. The Haqqani network was planning to transfer another shipment of explosives through an abandoned textile factory on the edge of a border town. The kicker? The route skirted an open-air market. One wrong move, and they'd be dragging civilians out of rubble. The factory was more than just a staging point. It was also a stronghold. 2 floors, reinforced entrances, multiple firing positions, a kill house, if there ever was one. The team prepped through the night. Every weapon cleaned, every mag loaded, comms checked and rechecked. Maya moved through the armory like she had 1,000 times before. But her mind was somewhere else. When she opened the M110's case, the smell of gun oil rose up, sharp and familiar. She ran her fingers along the cool steel. And for a second she wasn't here. She was in Helmand, lying in the dust beside Rabbit, listening to him breathe, She could almost hear his voice. Don't rush the shot. Breathe with it. Let it happen. She shut the case harder than she meant. 2. Insertion was just before dawn. A low cloud cover hung over the valley, muting the light, making the factory's outline ghostly against the skyline. They approached from the south, keeping to the drainage ditch until they were within 300 meters. From here, they split. Morrison's team toward the main entrance, Maya moving to a collapsed wall that offered overwatch on both the street and the factory windows inside her. Headset, Morrison's voice was all business. Remember, civilians first. If they're in there, we move slow. If they're not, we take it fast. Copy, she murmured. The first breach was quiet, too quiet. The outer door swung open. On rusty hinges, no tripwire, no resistance. Morrison's lead pair swept in. Weapons up, Maya scanned the windows. Nothing moved. Her gut was already telling her what her eyes couldn't see. The first shots came from the second floor. Controlled bursts aimed low. Trying to pin the team at the door, she found the shooter in his scope, a man with a short AK half hidden. Behind a curtain, one breath, one squeeze. He dropped, but for every one she saw, another took his place. The upper floor was crawling with them. Maya, we're taking fire from the stairwell. Morrison's voice snapped. She shifted her aim, caught a muzzle flash in the shadows, and put a round through it. The return fire didn't stop. Then she saw why. Behind one of the second-floor windows, half shielded by a steel column, was a man setting up something far heavier than an AK. It was a PKM belt-fed, with a clear line of fire on the Market Street. If it went hot, anyone caught outside, civilian or not, would be shredded. She exhaled, adjusted, took the shot. The gunner dropped, the belt of ammunition spilling like a silver snake across the floor. Morrison's men pushed up the stairs. Maya kept scanning, searching for movement. Beyond the obvious, that was when she saw it. A flash of something in a shadowed corner of the second floor. Not movement, reflection. She tightened the zoom. A scope, another sniper. But this one was different. The posture, the stillness. Whoever it was, they weren't a militia kid with a borrowed rifle. They were trained. Her stomach nodded. This one knows what they're doing. The angle was bad. If she tried to take the shot, she'd be half exposed. And whoever was on the other end of that scope would see her first. The call came from inside. We've got eyes on explosives. Morrison, timer's active. 30 minutes. That changed everything. She stayed locked on the shadowed sniper. The smart move would be to break off and help secure the explosives, but some part of her knew if she didn't deal with this one, Morrison's team wouldn't make it out. She shifted, slow, inch by inch, until the scope found just enough of the figure's shoulder and cheek. It was a woman, dark, hair pulled tight, cheek resting against the stock with the same steadiness Maya had drilled for years. Their eyes met through glass, and in that heartbeat, she knew. The woman's rifle lowered, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. Then she was gone. She wanted to call it in, but the words caught. How could she explain that moment to Morrison without sounding like she'd lost it? That she'd just traded recognition with a ghost in her own image? Instead, she shifted to cover the stairwell again, helping Morrison's men fight their way to the explosives. 22 minutes later, the bomb techs had the timer frozen. By then, the mysterious sniper had vanished, back at the forward base. Morrison didn't press her, not that night, but she caught him watching her as they cleaned weapons, as if he'd noticed something in her expression she hadn't meant to show. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to explain. She was good. She said quietly. Morrison looked up. Who? Whoever was up there with the rifle, she had the drop on me, but didn't take it? No. He studied her for a long beat. Sometimes, the ones who don't shoot are the ones you should worry about most. She didn't disagree. Later, lying in her bunk, she stared at the ceiling and thought about Rabbit again. about all the little things he'd taught her. The way he'd say the shot you don't take can be louder than the one you do. She wondered if he'd been talking about moments like this. The Haqqani network was hurt, but not dead, and somewhere out there was a sniper who'd looked her in the eye and chosen not to pull the trigger. Maya wasn't sure if that made her an ally, or the most dangerous enemy she'd ever face. It was 3 days before the next lead surfaced. 3 days of heat, dust, and the uneasy stillness that comes after a fight you know isn't finished. When it came, it was through a cracked radio intercept. Chatter about a meeting in the mountains. Away from the usual Haqqani routes, a high-value coordinator was set to appear. Someone they'd been chasing for months. The twist: Morrison's source warned that the meeting site would be guarded by an outside marksman. Maya didn't need to hear the rest to know. It would be her. The insertion was brutal. No vehicle approach, no easy climb. They moved on. Foot through rock gullies and narrow goat trails, the mountain air cutting sharp in their lungs. The meeting point was a flat shelf of rock near a narrow pass. A single stone hut crouched against the cliffside. From here, the only exits were the trail in and the drop. Morrison's team split into 2 elements. One to approach low along the pass. One, her and Kowalski, to climb the opposite ridge for overwatch. The climb burned every muscle in her legs. By the time they reached the top, sweat was running cold down her back despite the thin air. She set up the M110 behind a boulder, scanning the hut. 2 guards at the door, 3 more pacing the perimeter. But her focus was higher. The rock face above the hut, where a sniper would set up, that's where she saw her. Same dark hair, same stillness. The rifle's barrel just visible from behind a rock lip. This time, there was no hesitation in the recognition. The woman shifted slightly, glass catching the light for a fraction of a second. And Maya knew she was being watched just as closely. "Morrison," she said in the comms, "you've got a shooter on the ridge, west side, skilled, might be mercenary. Can you take her?" Maya's breath slowed. Yes, but she didn't fire, not yet. Movement at the hut's door. A tall man in a gray scarf stepped out, flanked by 2 guards. The coordinator, Morrison's voice. "Target confirmed. On my mark, we move." Maya kept one eye on him, and one on her opposite number. Then the woman's rifle shifted, not toward her, but toward Morrison's element. She was about to open fire on them. Maya's heart hit once, hard. She could end it now. 1 shot and Morrison's team would be safe. But in the same second, the woman did something strange. She lifted her left hand, just enough for Maya to see, and gestured, a flat palm, then a small shake. Wait. Maya's instinct screamed conflict. Was it a trick? A stalling move? Then she saw why. Down the trail, half hidden behind a bend, another group was moving in, heavily armed, closing fast. They weren't Morrison's men. They were here to kill everyone, Haqqani and Americans alike. The woman wasn't aiming at them. She was tracking the newcomers. Maya's decision was instant. She shifted her own rifle toward the bend and dropped the lead attacker before he even cleared the rocks. The woman mirrored her, taking the next. For 30 seconds, they worked together, no words, just the rhythm of fire and the sound of bodies hitting dust. When the last man fell, the pass was silent again. Below, Morrison's team surged forward, seizing the coordinator before he could retreat inside the hut. The guards went down fast, the operation moving like clockwork. But when Maya swung her scope back to the ridge, the woman was gone, again. They exfiltrated without incident. Back at the base, Morrison listened as she gave her report, careful, clinical, omitting the part where she and the sniper had fought. Side by side, when she finished, he studied her for a moment. "You think she'll come after you?" "I don't know," Maya said. "What do you think she wants?" Maya hesitated. To finish something. That night, she sat alone by the perimeter wall, watching the desert turn black under the stars. Her rifle rested across her knees, but a She wasn't cleaning it. She wasn't even holding it like a weapon. She was thinking about the look in the woman's eyes. Not anger, not fear. Something in between. It reminded her of herself. Years ago, before Rabbit was gone, before she'd sworn off pulling the trigger, that strange space where you still believed you could choose when to take a life and when to let it go in the end. The woman didn't reappear. Not on this mission. Not in the days that followed. Morrison's team rotated out. Their objective complete. Their record marked clean. Maya stayed behind. Her orders keeping her in country. For another month. She didn't ask for a reassignment. She didn't ask for leave. She just kept working. Repairing weapons, running Overwatch when needed. Walking the wall at night when no one else was around. Because somewhere out there, she knew, was someone who had looked her in the eye through glass and made the same choice she had. On her last night before rotation, she found herself back on the ridge above the canyon from the convoy op. The desert stretched out endless under the moonlight. And for the first time in a long time, she felt still inside. Maybe they'd meet. Again, maybe they wouldn't. But she knew one thing now. The shot you don't take can be the loudest one you ever fire. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.